Thank you for joining Brad Nickason and myself, Nancy Furness, for our third online We've Got Issues interview. We've Got Issues is a nonpartisan, citizens-based forum where we talk about issues of concern to Tri-Cities residents. We also serve as a kind of a mechanism to keep elected representatives connected to their constituents. Today, we are at the City Chambers for Coquitlam, City Council Chambers, and I just want to acknowledge that we are on unceded Coast Salish territories. And I would also like to express our gratitude to Tri-Cities Community Television for filming these interviews. So by filming these, it allows us to reach out to a broader audience. And it's also really important that these interviews are recorded because we no longer have a community television station. So today we have Mayor Richard Stewart, who is joining us, and we're going to chat about a few topics. We're going to first of all talk a little bit about COVID-19 and some of the challenges that the city has faced and how they're handling those. Then we will move on and talk a little bit about some environmental initiatives that are being undertaken in the city of Coquitlam. And finally, we will wrap up by having a discussion about how the mayor ensures that there's always an inclusive and respectful workplace in order to get all the important work at City Hall done. So I'd like to say welcome and thank you to Mayor Richard Stewart for joining us today, and we're really looking forward to chatting with you.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for coming to Coquitlam Council Chambers.
Thank you. With our current COVID-19 pandemic, it's of course affected individuals, businesses, and government on every level. I was wondering if you could maybe share with us a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced and that maybe City Council and the City of Coquitlam have faced, and give us a sense of how that's going and how you're handling some of those challenges.
Well, thank you. There is no question that this is the most unprecedented time in modern history where we truly have seen the entire world grappling with one issue all at once. And some communities doing really well, some jurisdictions doing extremely well, some doing having very great challenges. But all across the world, there are economic challenges, social difficulties, social challenges that are enormous. The reality that schools are closed and so many businesses are scrambling, trying to stay afloat. This is a challenging time. At a city, it's very challenging because we have to continue with the essential work of keeping pipes flowing and keeping roads clear and such. But we have to do it using the new public health rules. It becomes much more costly. We also had to initially close down so many facilities. The libraries closed, the community centers closed, the pools closed. And we discovered that it's much easier to close, as hard as it is to close those facilities, it's much easier to close them than it is to open them again. There are enormous complexities with opening a swimming pool, to the health measures as established by the provincial health officer and by the community recreations associations that are pooled together to try to figure out, well, how do we do this? We're all learning right across society. We're learning step by step how to do this. Those that have studied it, the epidemiologists and experts in epidemic controls, they've studied this their lives, and then we have to take their advice. We have to look to them for guidance, and then we have to work it all out. It has been incredibly challenging. We in Coquitlam have made the commitment that Council committed $5 million in order to try to support vulnerable groups, because there are challenges that are unique to, those of us who live in a single-family home, being locked up into our own property and on our own deck and our backyard and such. It might not be as much of a challenge than it is for seniors, for example, or persons with special needs, persons with medical vulnerabilities, all kinds of issues that affect small business that are now closed, but their costs are still there. How do we work through those sorts of things? So this has definitely been a time that none of us, it's not in the rule book. The guide for how to be mayor, how to be a council member doesn't include doing it during a pandemic.
I'd like to ask a little bit more about where that $5 million that you speak about is targeted. Where is that targeted? And how is just the staff of the city, how are they holding up amongst or during the middle of this particular unprecedented event as you described it?
We certainly, it happened in spring. So that's about the time we start hiring a whole crew of summer employees that didn't get hired this year because quite frankly, there was no need for that number.
I have a daughter in that category.
There you go. Yes.
And that it's home quickly.
Yeah, and now it's personal because that has implications as to how they pay for their college in the spring and next spring or this fall. So there's all those ramifications. But those that needed to continue working at the city, we had to work it out so that many of them are working remotely. About half of our staff are working remotely. Other than the essential services like obviously the public works crew that have to go out and manage stormwater systems, the police and fire, those crews have to figure out social distancing in environments where you can't social distance. So there's those complexities as well. We have, I take my hat off to the team. Every single day I come across a staff person that's gone above and beyond the call, trying to figure out how to make something work. We had a team at our Dogwood Pavilion and Glen Pine Pavilion. These are our seniors centers. They decided they're the kitchen team. They provide lunch at the cafeteria while the cafeteria is closed. So they took it upon themselves. We're gonna deliver. So twice a week they take orders and hundreds of meals. They prepare the meals and volunteers go out. I've done it myself, and a number of council members have done this in order to understand a little bit who we're delivering to. And these are isolated seniors, some of whom talk to one person a week in face-to-face, and that is the volunteer that comes to the front door with 2 frozen dinners ready to be heated up for their meals. Some of them haven't been shopping since March 16th. So haven't been out of the house. These are, many of them are quite vulnerable. So there's lots of different ways that the staff adapted to what we're having to face.
I think it's really a positive note to see the community coming together like this. It sounds like everybody has a role that they can play, and that the city has really stepped up as far as keeping the community connected. And I think as we sort of move into our second wave here, is there anything that you see or that you could share with your constituents as to how we can maybe mitigate or lessen that second wave coming up?
Well, let's follow the instructions. We've said all along, Coquitlam will be in lockstep with Dr. Bonnie Henry. And lockstep means that we're going to follow everything she does. We won't do more and we won't do less. We will, what she says we have to do is what we're doing.
But wait. It's a conspiracy, I thought. Isn't it a conspiracy out there that this is just a big hoax?
We hear that. We don't hear it from many people, but we do hear it, and it's really disappointing. There are a few community members of our community and other communities that have decided that no, this is we're all sheep and we're following, and it's a big conspiracy for government to control us all. We certainly see a caricature of that in the United States, where entire populations are of the mindset that government is bad, and everything that government is trying to do here is aimed at thought control and that sort of thing. It's disappointing. I hear from our residents that they dismiss that. They completely, they're offended by the suggestion that every epidemiologist, every scientist in the world is in on it, because that's what the implication is. Everybody that studied for a decade to become a doctor of epidemiology across the world, and that's millions of experts, all of them are in on it, and that this is a big conspiracy. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And masks and social distancing are the things that give us freedom in our society right now.
Exactly, yeah. And in fact, following what she says when she says it, because the team from BC Centre for Disease Control, they're all experts, but they've also given thought to this. Early in the pandemic, we had these regular meetings with government on Zoom and on teleconference, and Dr. Henry and other epidemiologists and Dr. Victoria here from Fraser Health Authority, and we're talking to them about, okay, well, some people are suggesting, for example, back then, we should all have masks. And they said, no, 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 no. And it turns out that the reason was because, no, we have to preserve the masks for those who really need it, the frontline workers. And now, as we manage to wrestle that one to the ground by social distancing and by self-isolation, we wrestled this to the ground like almost no other jurisdictions were as successful as we in British Columbia were. Now, when we want freedom, we have to follow the next set of instructions, which are small groups, masks. Let's do it this way. We all now know how to wash our hands. We can beat this thing, but only by following the experts and being in lockstep with when they tell us to do something. We need to do it.
And I think we just want to say that for our interview today, like, none of us are wearing masks, but just for information, when Brad and I came in, we both had our masks on. We're in the same social bubble, so we have been ever since the restrictions were changed and let up a little bit. So we don't wear a mask. We're a little bit closer together. And Mayor Stewart, you're sitting at least 6 feet away from us with no masks. So we're respecting those protocols.
And if you get any closer, I'm putting my mask on.
And I've got mine as well. I'm ready right here. So we are respecting those COVID restrictions as well, just to clarify that.
Yeah, one of our building inspectors came into my office with a set of drawings, and there was no way for us both to be looking at the drawings, so both of us had masks on. This isn't complicated.
And it's respect, isn't it? It's just respect for the other people around us. That's what we're doing, living in a society, respecting one another.
Yeah, we were brought up that respect was shaking hands, greeting people politely. The new respect is not shaking hands, staying 6 feet away, and when you're indoors, putting on a mask. Let's all just show respect to each other.
Awesome. I think that one of the things that we are interested in, we've got issues, and what we're asking, or we're trying to bring to people, is what the cities are doing environmentally, where they stand, and what are their environmental programs that they're taking on. So maybe I'd just like to let you talk a little bit about that side of that topic, as it with regards to the city of Coquitlam. What's their policies? What are the things that they're doing right now with regards to the environment?
We believe passionately that if you plan, you set up strategic plans and include the things that are important. You have to include them in your plans. And so we're right now in the process of developing an environmental sustainability plan that will be part of our strategic plan and will help guide those decisions. We're passionate about the urban containment boundary, for example, which is the regional growth strategy includes the only urban containment boundary of any consequence in North America that's actually working. It actually is a hard line around development. It says we're going to be a compact region. We're going to grow in population based on whatever the federal government decides, because we're not responsible for immigration. But as we grow, we're not going to grow in footprint. We're going to stay within the urban containment boundary. Coquitlam passionately believes that too, and we have dedicated our green spaces as green spaces in our regional growth strategy in the local context statement for Coquitlam. We have identified the environmentally sensitive areas. These are really important things because we know that we'll also be looking, people will see trees come down to build a house or build developments and that sort of thing. And those are challenges that we all have to contemplate as we balance this. How do we make it a compact region? Well, the best way to make it a compact region is to build upward rather than building outward. So the environmental sustainability plan will include measures like GHG reductions and the switching to mode shift related to transit and active transportation. My bike has been my form of transportation since COVID started pretty much. Unfortunately, this week is the first week that I haven't been able to cycle to the office because of the smoke. My doctor said, no, you're in your 60s, you don't get to cycle in this kind of thick air. But I think contemplating how a community can make sure that active transportation is a big part of it, the GHG reductions, the climate action charter that we signed on to is something that we live by. We have, for example, we have two of our precincts, our public precincts, this one and the one of Poirier, that use shared ground heat. We take, it's called the Thermonex system. It allows us to take waste heat primarily from, in this building, there's the waste heat from all the electronic equipment and such. At Poirier, it's waste heat when you create ice. Creating ice means you have to spill heat. Well, we don't spill it. Instead, we pump it down into the ground. We store it there until we need it to heat the pool, which is right next door, or to heat the library just down the road. Those kinds of really district energy almost kinds of systems can help us reduce environmental impact of our facilities and our operations, something we have to do by the Climate Action Charter, but something we're proud to do because we're looking at our grandchildren and trying to say, is this going to be a good place for them?
And I believe just very recently you came up with a climate adaptation strategic plan that has some of those mitigation and adaptation pieces in it. Can you speak a little bit about some of those specific topics?
Sure. Well, I wish we didn't have to do them. But we recognize fully that our climate is changing. And we know that there are jurisdictions that don't recognize that fully. And that's part of the reason why our climate is changing, is that there's a conspiracy.
I was just thinking about that joke.
I wish it were funnier because it's tragic, really.
Science-based, though, right? This is just the same as the COVID issue.
Absolutely.
It's based on science.
Exactly. And every recognized scientist in the world says the climate is changing because of humans and our activity on Earth and our spilling of carbon. Carbon that's been in the ground for millions of years is now being put into the atmosphere, and that's creating a predictable result.
And we have to deal with it.
We have to deal with it. So sea level will rise, for example. The natural consequence of that, we'll have to raise dikes in order to protect flat areas. The floodplain that is much of South Coquitlam, much of Northeast Coquitlam, a good portion of Port Coquitlam, those are all challenges that the two communities have to work together on because we share those dikes. But there's a culvert underneath a road in my neighborhood, for example, and the city has gone in and improved the entrance to the culvert. I won't use technical language, made it more resilient to the kinds of flash flooding that can happen because of a severe storm event, and where suddenly you get a lot of wind and rain. But we've also made it so that there's an overflow, because we have to make it so that our systems are more resilient to the kind of extreme weather events we're going to get more often. We're getting them more often. We see them more often. We'll see a windstorm now or a rainstorm. In many jurisdictions, they'll get a 200-year rainstorm every 3 years. And obviously that doesn't make sense, and that's the new normal, but it doesn't make sense in the way in which our communities were designed 100 years ago.
So you're starting to take action to adapt to what's happening. And I'm not sure if we spoke about this in advance and whether I told you this was going to come, but it's something that I'm thinking about right now. From your perspective, do you think that this work that we're doing from a community should be done in a community level, and it should be adaptation, or is there should cities be looking further afield at the culprits and talking to them about what they've done? And I apologize. I hope this is
absolutely, because there are the two streams. Your first question is, what are we doing for sustainability? And that's what we're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a role to play by reducing our impact. There are levels of government whose role includes reducing other people's impacts, but we don't have that legislative authority. We can't impose emission standards, for example, on vehicles. You can't have a different emission standard in Coquitlam than you'd have in Burnaby, obviously.
Then do you advocate on behalf of the people in the community? Do you go talk to those people? Because I know
absolutely.
That you obviously talk and encourage them to deal with it. And do you think that they should be doing that? Those other levels of government should be at this time talking to, encouraging the adaptation of our energy sources, because you just talked to us a few minutes ago about this really cool idea of transferring heat from the ice rink into the library and I don't know if I've got that mixed up a little bit, but you know what I'm talking about. You came up with this new idea of what we can do with energy. Shouldn't we be looking at doing that in the bigger world, finding new energy things, and do you encourage that?
Absolutely. So it's both, how do we reduce our impact on the environment? Carbon is part of that, but certainly there are pollutants, micropollutants, plastics, all kinds of other impacts on our environment. And the extent to which our role includes that, it usually is primarily on municipal operations, but sometimes we have a legislative role in other aspects to, for example, an anti-idling bylaw, which we're in the process of developing now. There's small impacts, and it's not something that we should be reinventing in every community. There's 160 times across the province that we'd have to do this. It would be better if the province did it, to the extent that it needs to be done, and similarly at the federal level. And they have the tools as well to impose such requirements on businesses, on industry, and that. So we all have to work together. Each of us has a role. We can, for example, at the regional level, I sit as the chair of Liquid Waste Committee, which handles the region's sewage, and there's an awful lot of sewage that the region generates. But one of the offshoots of that is that, can we recover some elements? As we're processing this and trying to make it as clean as possible before it's discharged into the environment, can we recover some resources? And one of them is waste heat. Half of what you flush, half of what goes down the drain is warm water or hot water, the shower, the dishwasher, the clothes washer. And as a result, the intake at the sewage treatment plant, the intake in sewage pump houses, is warmer than natural water. So we can use essentially heat pumps to draw some of that excess heat out and use it in industry, for example. We're right now at the North Shore plant that's under construction right now, we're building in a system that will take out some of the excess, the waste heat, and pump it into the plant next door, the business next door that needs heat, a heat source. We're able to sell the waste heat to them, that industry, and allow that the discharge is actually cooler now. It's more in tune with the environment, and we've offset a whole bunch of carbon that would have been burned or electricity that would have been used to heat up to provide them that heat. We can do that. The digester gases in a sewage plant are now being converted into natural gas, either to generate electricity for the plant's needs, or in most of the other plants, we're making it so that we're cleaning that to the point where we can put it into the Fortis grid, and Fortis is able to sell it as renewable energy because it doesn't pull carbon out of the ground.
One thing, you're talking about different energy sources and how to sort of use those different energy sources. I noticed when I was coming into City Hall is that there's an EV charging station just out front now. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, what the plan is going forward as far as maybe building a larger network of EV stations?
Well, we're right now adding more EV stations, public EV stations, in in publicly accessible locations. There's several here at City Hall, including a bunch for the City Hall fleet. The city is converting much of its fleet, where possible, to compact zero-emission vehicles. My own car is I drive an electric vehicle, a Nissan Leaf, and I just love the fact that I used to drive a hybrid, but this means I don't tune up my car anymore. I don't have to buy fuel at all, and I plug in when I get home. And so that conversion, though, doesn't work well for people that live in older apartment buildings because they don't have an electric source to plug into. We're working with a company that's right here in Coquitlam called Plugzeo, and he developed a module that sits on a 110. You can take a fob and swipe it, and as a result, it'll power up the plug and record how much electricity you use, so that we can now install those on, say, lampposts out in the street and allow people to plug their car in at 110 on a lamppost, and allow it to be installed in an underground parking lot for a 20-year-old condo building or a rental building. And it's revenue neutral for the rental landlord or the condo strata property, but it provides the residents the ability to be zero emission when they drive. This is going to change that side of the emissions profile all across North America, all across the world. The electric car, our grandchildren will laugh at the fact we used to have something called internal combustion, because we will have moved off of that. The city wants to be part of that. We are requiring every new condominium, every new building built to have electric charging for every unit. It makes sense, and it is the way of the future. There's no question that we're going to be phasing out internal combustion passenger vehicles very soon as a society.
Where does the city stand on that? Can we move forward on transit? I know it's not a city issue specific.
It's not, but it's one of the main reasons I ran for mayor 10 years ago or 12 years ago was because of the 20-year stalemate in getting transit. Rapid transit to Coquitlam. It was promised in 1986. During Expo 86, they were promised that the next line we built would be Coquitlam. Of course, it wasn't. It was to Surrey, and then the next one will be Coquitlam. No, it'll be from New Westminster back into Vancouver. Okay, well, the next one. Well, no, that was Richmond. And then deeper into Surrey, and then so we really needed to break the logjam and get. I want SkyTrain, I want rapid transit, I actually like light rail as well. I want it to get spread right through the Lower Mainland within fingers of rapid transit. The bus will still be the backbone of the system. We need to make buses more passenger friendly and make people understand that my car was totaled 3 years ago in the summer, and that's when I got my electric car, or ordered it, but it wasn't available. So for 3 months, I didn't have a car, and try to do this job without a car. So I was on transit and on my bike, and you quickly learn that transit actually works. It works fine. You can combine it with a bike. You can put the bike on front of the bus or take it on SkyTrain as long as it's not during rush hour and those sorts of things. We want people to embrace rapid transit and, public transit generally. COVID messes all that up because we know that we had Metro Vancouver, TransLink had the best ridership increases in North America. There's lots of jurisdictions that were having absolutely stale increases in ridership. We were having outstanding increases in ridership, even net of the expansion of the system, for several years, and then COVID hit, and everybody lost passengers very quickly. They went back to the private vehicle. ICBC's rates have gone up, so there's lots of people with private vehicles that are trying to figure something else out, and that's where the electric assist bike, I think, is going to be. I hope a savior. I ride an electric assist bike because my ride home is Chilco, which is a stupid bike route.
I always wondered how you got up that hill.
I'm on my third electric assist bike, and I absolutely love it. A day that I can't cycle is not a good day. And this has been a terrible week for that, with the smoke. But we now see. We were in Parksville this summer, and we saw. I remember at one point I'm cycling over to Coquitlam Beach, which is a 30, 40, 50-minute bike ride. And coming the other way is a woman had to be 82, 83 years old on her electric assist bike, decked out properly and lots of safety equipment. But I really think that the way Amsterdam, the way cities in the Netherlands or in France have embraced cycling, partly because they're flat, we can embrace cycling with our hills if we have a way to flatten the hills, and that's what that little 500-watt motor does.
And is there a plan, I know that there have been more bike lanes going in lately, is there a plan to continue expanding the bike lanes in Coquitlam?
Absolutely. In fact, this week we installed, or I guess about a week ago, it got hoisted into place, the largest bike bridge one of the largest bike bridges in the Lower Mainland. It's the King Albert Greenway. So across the Como Creek along King Albert Corridor is a really big, if you go past it, you'll see an amazing piece of infrastructure that allows kids to walk to school more, a safer path than a little narrow path through the forest. It goes across a large ravine, but it also will connect east to west through Coquitlam, which is hard to do. We only have two arterials, Austin and Como Lake. They're both 4 lanes, exactly, not 4 lanes and a little bit for bikes. And I am an experienced cyclist and don't like riding on either one of them. So you can't imagine that they're good for all ages and abilities. So converting that so that you can have safer bike infrastructure, preferably separated from traffic, will allow kids to ride bike to school. You know, if you learn something if you get into a habit as a young person, you're probably going to be doing it for the rest of your life, whether it's smoking or bike riding. And I'd rather it be bike riding.
That's great. I'd support that 100% of the way.
We're in a nice area in the Tri-Cities, and there's lots of opportunities. I think that my only thing is I'd like to see connections between the communities a little stronger. Some of the roads and things like the bike paths that exist, there are places that are broken up.
Oh, absolutely. For example, and one of our biggest transportation headaches in the Tri-Cities isn't actually in the Tri-Cities, it's the Brunette interchange. We can't get to Royal Columbian Hospital for about 3 hours a day. Or rather, you get hampered in your ability to get to our regional hospital. And right next to the hospital is TransLink. So when have to go to a morning meeting at TransLink, if I don't get up early enough, I'll take my bike because I can't take my car. The congestion is just too bad. But the bike connections in New Westminster are awful. Brunette doesn't have any way to get to TransLink for that last kilometer. So you end up taking the lane, and there's a big truck right behind you. Life is about trying to get better connections, and so we're right now putting in a greenway right along the Lougheed Highway. They will connect up to the new greenway that goes through Riverview Hospital. So you'll be able to get from Town Centre Park all the way to the Portman Bridge on a separated bike route. And we have lots more to do, obviously. United Boulevard is a big part of that. Getting the Austin connection done, it's a parallel route about 2 blocks away from Austin. Those are important connections because we don't want the bikes necessarily to be on arterials. We want them to be in a safe, separated route.
I would encourage the link between the Maryhill bypass and Coquitlam as well, Coquitlam.
Absolutely. Well, particularly since when you get to Burnaby, now you're connected to the Central Valley Greenway, and the Coquitlam to Central Valley Greenway connection is weak. We've got work to do.
Wouldn't it be brilliant if that was all connected? It would be fantastic for our area. I think at this point, we'd like to move towards the democratic process. We'd like to talk to you about how City Hall works, how Coquitlam City Hall works. And because you're the resident expert, I think that you're the person that we'd like to ask. To start with, something really just a very simple question. What are the roles and responsibilities of mayors and councils?
And that's probably the most important question from my perspective. So we'll get an email that says, "Dear Mayor, my garbage didn't get picked up," or "Dear Mayor, that stop sign is in the wrong spot." And we get them all the time, whether it's snow clearing, whatever. And we try to remind people that mayor and council are there to make policy decisions. Staff make operational decisions. They operationalize the decisions that count, the policies that council have put in place. So council, for example, says that we will do, let's say, traffic calming in a certain neighborhood, and then staff get in there and they design it because they're the experts in where to put traffic control devices and what they should look like. And any city that relies on the mayor to design the traffic control devices is not a city I'd like to drive in. It really should not be me, and it isn't me. So it's an important distinction that mayor and council make the policy decisions. And we make three kinds of policy decisions. We make bylaw, we make rules, we make financial decisions, the budgeting and the where money gets spent, not the minute what kind of furniture we buy or whatever. Yeah, exactly, and the amounts of budgets. And we make the land use decisions, where the buildings go. And so those three kinds of policy decisions are in the realm of this mayor and council. We're a 9-member city council. They're always odd numbers. They're typically 5, 7, or 9. Larger one like Vancouver is 11. But they're always the same kinds of decisions, no matter which community you're in. There are communities certainly that get more, the council gets a little bit more involved in I would argue, micromanaging. I don't think that's a good thing to do. I think we all should stick to our expertise, and if we hire a traffic engineer, that person should be in charge of traffic engineering.
How do you ensure that there's accountability and I think equally important transparency? Like when city council and mayor are making bylaws or making some of these big decisions that really affect the whole community, how do you ensure that there's public consultation and just general transparency in those decisions?
Well, it's probably our most important role because making the decision quite often is easy, but getting the public to participate in the decision-making process and having the public understand and if not agree with, at least embrace the decision that was arrived at, those are what makes democracy work. And so I passionately believe that we need to explain well. We need to include early. And we need to, and once a decision has been made, we need to explain that as well. For example, I'll often end up writing a very long response to an email, trying to explain something, and I'll save it because I know someone else asked the same question, and we can paste that in there. So I don't write them all personally, but I've heard from other colleagues around the region that why would you spend so much time explaining that? Well, I think because we owe it to the people that have entrusted us with the governance of the city. We owe them to be able to answer the question as to why you did that. And almost always, just yesterday, the answer came back from the fellow, I apologize. I just realized that I misunderstood what you'd done, and your explanation really helped. Thank you very much. And we get that all the time. We want people to participate. We have public information meetings all the time. That's the hardest thing, though, because we're all busy. And the public, we will often do a 2.5 or 3 year process for a city, a neighborhood plan, like right now the city center area plan, or the Austin Heights plan, or the Coquitlam Lougheed neighborhood plan. It'll be a 2 or 3 year process. And at the end of it, we'll come together and we'll have assembled all this stuff, and staff will have made some recommendations, and we'll adopt it. And we almost always adopt it unanimously because we've worked so hard on it. And then as soon as it's implemented, someone will write to us and say, I can't believe this is the first I hear about this. And okay, well, we had all these meetings. It was on the front page of the Tri-City News a dozen times. And when I explain that, almost every other elected official that I know has exactly the same experience, whether it's Campbell River or Quesnel. You can't get them engaged. It's hard to get people engaged because we're all busy. And then once it impacts them directly, they get really engaged, but they also feel like they've been left out up until now. And that's hard.
Who knows what the easy answer is to that? There is.
I know the school board faces the same kind of thing. You send the notice home with you can send it home 10 times, and there will be households that still haven't seen the notice, or we're all busy.
I guess one thing that kind of interests us as well is you have so many different voices on council that you're dealing with, like different points of view, different perspectives. How do you work as mayor with the leadership role in ensuring that everybody has a voice and that they're listened to in a respectful manner, and not necessarily that everybody's going to agree all the time, but just how do you make sure that they're heard in a respectful way, and how do you resolve issues when you can't come to that unanimous decision on something? Is there a process, or is there anything you can speak to on that?
I believe that it's part of the mayor's role to not just find consensus, but to try to build it. And that's not always possible. There's no question. There's 9 people at this table, and each one of them is passionate about his or her perspectives and beliefs. Some of them have strongly held beliefs in one direction, some of them don't on that subject. And listen perhaps more carefully to try and determine where they want to go. But in the end, each one of them was sent to work to this room by the voters of Coquitlam, and it's not up to me to second guess that everybody belongs here. All 9 of them belong here, and so the job of mayor, I believe, is to make sure that each one of them has a voice and has an ability to share that voice. And then ultimately it will be a vote. But most of the time we've been able to work through complex issues. Part of it is because we don't have parties. We're lucky in Coquitlam that there are no political parties. We all have connections to, or a preference that we might wear on our sleeve or might not. But there are no political parties at the table, and therefore this person is just as likely to align with this person on this one, but then not align on the next item. The goal, though, is to try to get everybody on the same page, and so sometimes that means continuing to talk through it and trying to figure, okay, your concern is the day of the week. Well, why don't we move it to this, and why don't we adjust this? And we've been able to get to the point now where we're about unanimous. We're unanimous on almost everything. We have entire meetings where we've been unanimous the whole night. Some people think that's dysfunctional. Well, no, actually, that's exactly how democracy should work. We should try to get it so that all parties agree, if there's political parties, but everybody in the assembly agrees. That would be ideal.
I guess keeping the best interests of your community in mind helps if that's sort of the underlying goal that everybody has in common, that hopefully you can work out those little wrinkles around it. And it takes a lot of work.
We see that, where we see the best interests of our community being uppermost in everybody's minds. And if you've got some other political agenda, that's not going to work well. If your political agenda is what's best for our community, even if we disagree, we can at least hash it out and try to figure out what's best.
And I guess, do you have any other topics that you'd like to bring up and discuss?
Well, the 2 most important issues that I think society has to grapple with right now, not counting the pandemic, because that's an emerging issue but a short-term one. The longer-term issues, from my perspective, are housing and mental health. On the housing side, we as a society have traditionally relied on the market to provide housing. It's not like in England, for example, where county or the local council builds housing and everybody's a tenant of the local council. We traditionally have had both ownership and rental housing built by the market and privately owned. How do we make the market work better so that housing is produced at a more affordable cost, but also at densities that allow for that affordability. Density is a bad word from some people's perspective, but as Mayor Sam Sullivan used to say, that people are against two things, sprawl and density. And okay, well, so we've decided not to sprawl with the urban containment boundary. So now we have to find ways to make density work in a way that's socially acceptable and allows equitable citizenship in our community. And housing, that was my background, that was my career, I founded the Society for Housing Affordability in BC. I did a bunch of consumer work and building code work related to housing. And now I find myself at this side of the table with a bunch of background and a lot of respect for the players that need to bring this all together. The non-market sector, the senior government sector, there's a lot of work to be done there. The other one is mental health. I would say mental health and addictions, but addictions is a form of a mental health challenge. My daughter, a lot of people know, my daughter was very public with her mental health challenges and her hospitalizations, and she's doing much better now because of the treatments that are available. And in fact, she just completed her requirements as a registered psychiatric nurse.
Congratulations to her.
But I mention that only because there is, if society takes this issue seriously, embraces it, gets rid of the stigma, and moves us forward and allows for treatment for mental health and addictions, we can get people their lives back, and we can allow the contributions they will make to society will far outweigh the costs of the treatments, the available. There are so many gaps in the mental health system. These aren't municipal services, but municipalities have to step in with policing, which is a horrible response to mental health crisis, but it's the only one. So people talk about defunding the police. I would argue, no, find us a better medical solution to a crisis call on mental health, because as a father, I've had to make the call, and the uniform with a gun comes to the door. That's not going to reduce the anxiety. The level of anxiety will only be reduced by a medical solution to a medical problem.
So I just want clarification. When you used the phrase defund the police, I think your meaning was don't defund the police necessarily, but add a component of mental health within that structure so that a mental health professional, come to the door with the authority of the police, so that
I quoted the phrase defund. It's not mine by any means, and I disagree with it. This isn't about money. This is about the police should not be the response to a health crisis.
Right.
And it should be a health response. And the police agree. I had one of our inspectors in my office today who used to work at Riverview Hospital prior to her policing career. And she finds it, absolutely abhorrent that when you call 911 for a mental health crisis, the ambulance has to stay up the road because the police have to intervene first, and that's in the protocols. There are lots of systems and jurisdictions where they've got a Car 67 sort of a solution, which is a psychiatric nurse and a plainclothes police officer that together can respond, and the police officers there is primarily to keep everyone safe. But these generally aren't the most dangerous of police calls. So our job is to find a medical intervention to a medical crisis. If you're called heart attack, I promise you, we're not going to send the police department. We're going to send someone that can help you with the heart attack. And a mental health crisis is a health crisis. So it's about making sure that the intervention is the appropriate intervention. And across North America, and it's one of our biggest challenges. And one of the most scary things about being a police officer, I suspect, is that you're being asked to be quasi-psychiatrist for a few minutes on that call, and you took the 1-week course in how to de-escalate a mental health crisis, but really the goal should be, we need to get you a solution that's medical, and we need to get you into a facility if that's what it needs. that's medical, and that should be medical professionals.
And I think it's something that is not going to go away anytime soon with COVID and with increased isolation and all the challenges around that. I suspect we may see increased mental health issues.
I worry about that because isolation is part of it. Certainly the depression associated with economic circumstances can be part of it. The anxiety that this is a completely, part of anxiety is being in a situation you've never been in before, and none of us have been here before.
Especially if you're alone.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So mental health, from my perspective, is something that we all should be working on. It's not a local government issue, but it's certainly our experience as local governments is that it's not being handled perfectly right now.
But it is something that local governments do have to address.
Yeah, we face the impact of the failures and the gaps, just as families face the impacts of failures and gaps, and victims of violence associated with this, because it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes there's violence associated with the failure of the mental health system. We should look to the mental health system to solve this. This isn't criminal justice. Criminal justice doesn't do a very good job on health. It's not designed for that. So don't defund the police. Just give the police responsibility for policing and give health responsibility for health.
And I think that when people mention the words defund the police, I think that's a lot of what they're trying to say. This is a fabulous, this part of the conversation is fabulous as well. And it's, unfortunately, we have already run over our time. So I'm wondering if maybe one day we can come back and talk to you about these other issues as well. I hope this has been a good experience.
I'll tell you, if you ever want to talk about mental health as it affects communities, I will cancel everything.
We'll be setting up the appointment soon. That'd be awesome to do that, because that's an issue that I think is really important as well. And Nancy and I have been advocates of mental health as long as we've known each other, for sure. But at this point, I have to stop. I have to begin to close our thing. We've already asked too much of you for your time. So I'd like to say thank you very much. If you don't mind me calling you Richard, or Mr. Mayor, or your council, or your excellency.
I prefer your highness or your majesty.
Is that better? Is that better? No, I thought that was just somebody to the south who wants that. I want to say thanks to Richard Stewart for being here and participating in this. This is excellent. It's awesome to get to allow people in our community to to know more about the people who make the decisions. So thank you sincerely. Thank you very much for being here and allowing us to do this.
It truly is my pleasure, and I particularly thank you for the last question, the open-ended one. This morning we had a meeting over Zoom with the minister responsible for mental health and addictions, advocating for solutions related to Riverview, solutions related to, particularly on the addiction side. These are massive. There's some really, people think of roads and pipes and parks and libraries, but mental health is one of those realities that we're all facing, and I appreciate
all have
that.
to face it in everybody's life.
Thank you.
So I would like to also thank anybody who's taken the time to watch this. This We've Got Issues is, as I said, a citizen-based forum. Our intent is to get to have these really deeper conversations with the people who are doing the work on behalf of us, on behalf of our communities. I'd also like to take the time at this point to thank the City of Coquitlam for making council chambers available to us to do this. I'd like to especially thank Tri-City Community TV. A lot of people don't understand that community TV has, on a level like this that reaches out and talks about our communities, it has disappeared. The funding for it has disappeared at a government, I think at a government level. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this really well. But the thing is, we still have these fabulous dedicated volunteers who are taking the time to do this, and they're looking for funding in little tiny places. I would like to especially thank them for helping us do this within our community. So thanks to them. If you can ever get a chance to talk to Mayor Stewart or the mayors of any of the cities in the Lower Mainland, encourage them to speak up for community television?
Let me tell you, the work of Tri-City Community Television, filling that gap, because it used to be a government mandated thing. It wasn't government funded, but government mandated, that we would have access to community television right here that would help inform folks. The absence of that isn't good. The absence of that it means that people are less informed, and less informed is, yeah, exactly. They're less informed means less involved, and and really, once they're less involved, then littering goes up. All kinds of social realities go up because they don't feel part of the community, and social inclusion needs information. And so thank you to the Tri-City Community Television and to all volunteers that try to, like yourselves, that are trying to inform folks. That's an important role.
So thank you again, Richard. Thank you very much for watching We've Got Issues, and we look forward to bringing you more of this kind of programming.